Hello everyone, Nigel Saunders here of KW Bonsai. Today I'm going to be sharpening my bypass pruners. These were new pruners at the start of the season, and I've used them all summer, and now they're very dull and need of some good sharpening and some maintenance work to them. Winter is a good time to do all those jobs that you just don't seem to get time to do in the summer. Sharpening your tools, oiling them up, getting them ready for the next season. The first step in sharpening these bypass pruners is to take them apart. So they have a nut on the top here that we need to loosen and remove, like that. Then we'll spring it open, release the safety, spring it open, and push out the bolt. So there's our bolt. There's a cap on it. There's our replaceable blade, our fixed blade, our spring, and our adjusting mechanism. So we're going to take it all the way apart, taking this off too. And we can take off our blade, if I can get it off. Oh yeah, it's coming. There it goes. There we go, and this comes out. These screws are extremely tight. I don't really have to take this section apart. The only reason I was going to take it apart was to put some grease on the screws to make it easier to take apart next time. So we might leave that together. The two critical parts on your pruners are the two blades. They come together and shear the wood. So these are the two pieces we'll be sharpening today. With any blade, there's a flat side and a beveled side. The other blade has to be flat on this side, and we've got a 90-degree angle. So the blade comes and shears it against that straight part. When a blade is sharp, the cutting edge here will almost disappear. There'll be no light reflecting off it. The first step of sharpening any blade is to get your flat surface absolutely flat. I'm working on top of a granite surface table that I purchased specifically for the job of sharpening my tools. I wouldn't go out and purchase a granite surface table for sharpening your bonsai tools. Any flat surface will work. A sheet of glass, a good countertop, anything that is absolutely flat. The objective for sharpening your flat surfaces is to get them absolutely flat with a mirror finish. The closer it is to a mirror finish on both cutting surfaces, the sharper your edge will be. I'm starting out with a sheet of 400 sandpaper. It's wet and dry sandpaper. And I place it on top of my surface plate. And the moisture will just hold it down flat. If you need more moisture, you can just spray the underside a bit. Stick your paper down. You don't need any glue or anything. Water works fine. Once you have your sandpaper down nice and flat, we can begin finishing our flat surfaces. I wouldn't go any coarser than 400 grit sandpaper for starters. You have to remember that all these scratches that the sandpaper leaves in your metal have to eventually be removed. So we're going to start with 400 and we work towards getting up to 1,000 to 2,000 grit sandpaper. So we're going to turn this rusty old surface here into a mirror. So here I go. I'm just going to grip the blade with my fingers. You can wet your fingers to get a bit more grip. And you just rub it, keeping it flat. And you rub it back and forth on the sandpaper. Eventually, we'll be trailing away from our cutting edge, only pulling in this direction. But for now, we're just doing any motion to remove all the rust and areas that are out of flatness. You can see already we have a high spot in the center of this blade, and we're not getting much contact in the edges. So you'll often find that blades right from the factory aren't flat to begin with. So we'll keep working at it. You can work this wet. The only trouble is, if you use wet, it covers up the shiny spots. So let me just try to show you this. If I spray some water on here, and I'm grinding with it wet like this, and you turn it over, it's harder to see where you're shiny. You can see it there, but it's harder, especially when you get quite a paste going of sandpaper and metal and I found it doesn't really make your sandpaper last a whole lot longer, having it wet. Let's have a look at it now. As you see, we're still removing metal in the middle here, and nothing at the tips. So it shows the blade was quite out of flat. And you can go through quite a bit of sandpaper when you're doing this operation. You might use 4 or 5 sheets per blade. There are sharpening machines you can buy. However, they don't sharpen even close to hand sharpening. Hand sharpening is the best method of sharpening any tool. The shiny spot's growing, but we still have no contact at the tip or at the base here. I'm on my second sheet of sandpaper now, and you can see I'm starting to get some contact out here at the tip. My flat spot is growing. I've got it covering the base down here. So still some work to go. I've got one of the cutting blades flattened now. So it's time to do the other cutting surface. Here's my other cutting surface. So you can see the ground part here, which is rusty, needs to be ground flat again. So again, we'll just give it a rub. Keeping the pressure flat on your blades. You don't want to just push on one spot or it won't flatten it evenly. I've got step 1 completed now. I've got both my mating surfaces flattened. So if we put the blades together, you can see the 2 flat edges ride nicely on top of each other. There's no gaps between the blades. So when you adjust the blades, how close they are together, they'll just glide nice and smoothly across each other. The inside surface of this thicker blade can be just dressed up lightly. Make sure it's smooth. You don't want to round the corner down here between your cutting surface and your blunt surface. There should be a sharp 90-degree corner here. But you do just want to clean it up so it's smooth. And you should feel a slight lip there where it's sharp. And I do. When I drag my thumb across, I can feel an edge. So this blade is almost ready to go. It just needs some final polishing. The bevel blade has 2 bevels on it. It has a primary bevel and a secondary bevel along the cutting edge. If a blade is too sharp, if the angle is too low, it becomes too brittle on the edge and it'll chip away and break. If the angle is too blunt, it requires too much force to cut the piece of wood. So it's kind of a compromise. They have a 2 bevel system, so it keeps a nice strong blade, but it's not so blunt that it's hard to cut. So I'm just going to get all the sap and rust off our primary bevel just by sanding it by hand for starters. And then we'll address the critical secondary bevel to get it nice and sharp and polished. The secondary bevel doesn't have to be all that smooth because it doesn't do any actual cutting. It's just sort of, the cutting's taking place on the tip and the wood just kind of comes around it. It's not doing any cutting in this area. I've got the blade all cleaned up, all the rust off it, the sap, the tar, everything from the season of cutting. So now it's time to shape our beveled edge that does the actual cutting. The cutting edge operation has to be done by hand because it's a rounded surface and it's on a constant angle. So you need to find that angle. You can do that by dragging the blade. If you have it on too shallow an angle, the cutting edge is off the sandpaper and it doesn't dig in. You won't feel it gripping. Too sharp an angle, it'll grip in too much. So you want to find that the angle that the blade is ground to. And you do that by feel. You'll see it starting to lighten up my cutting edge as I grind it. And we always grind away from the edge, so we start in this direction and pull it this way. You never push it against the edge of the blade, or you won't get it as sharp. Where it's hard to get in the middle here, you have to come to the edge of your table, right down here, and get this part off the edge and grind it like this. Always trying to feel the right angle as you're grinding. It's just something you do by feel. You can check to see how you're grinding. If you're hitting the bevel flat on, some people will run a magic marker across there, grind it at an angle and see if the marker disappears evenly, and you'll feel your blade starting to sharpen up. I can start to feel a good cutting edge happening now. So I'll continue doing that until I've got my edge nice and sharp. I've got the edge sharpened here. It still needs a little work. So far we've just been using, 800 sandpaper. So now it's time to go down and polish everything with finer sandpaper. So we're going to go 1000 grit down to 2000 grit and then finally a polish with polishing compound. A word of caution, once you start getting these blades polished up with 800 grit or higher, they start to get extremely sharp. They're right now it's probably as sharp as any razor blade. You can shave the hair off your arm with it. So be very careful of the edge. It will cut you quite badly if you're not careful. I'm smoothing the blades with the 2000 grit sandpaper now, and they're starting to get their mirror finish on them. You can see the reflection of the other blade in here. You can see that? Yeah. So they're getting there. They're also getting extremely sharp. The blades are now ready for final polishing. I've got them pretty smooth with the 2000 grit paper. The last operation I'm going to do before assembly is a final polish of the parts. The reason I'm polishing the parts up so much is, one, you get a really nice cutting edge, and the second reason is all the sap and goop from your trees doesn't stick to the blade. It doesn't get in the little fine scratches and cracks of the metal. So we're going to give it a final polish. I've got a Jeweler's Rouge, which is a paste-like polish, and I just rub it on a sheet of paper and then polish the blades on it. So we're going to use there's a chart on the back here. It goes from coarse to fine. So fine is the blue polish. It's a blue all-purpose polish. So we're going to take that out, our blue one, and polish the blades up. For this operation, I just use a plain piece of paper and I rub the polishing compound into the paper. Blow off the excess dust, and then you polish your parts. And you can see the compound turns black because it's removing metal from the blade. And your blade gets really highly polished. Let's try our beveled blade now. And you can see it gets really nicely polished. I'm ready to reassemble all my pieces of my pruners. Before I assemble them, I'm going to give them a coating of oil or grease or Vaseline just to protect the blades, stop them from corroding, and to give them some lubrication when you're using the cutters. These tools are extremely sharp now, however they won't stay sharp forever. You use them for pruning your trees and eventually they'll get dull again and you'll have to repeat this operation. You'll find once you get these surfaces nice and flat that maintenance on them is a lot easier than the first time you do this work. So I'm going to put Vaseline on all my parts that I'm putting together. My spring. Keep it all in good shape and lubricated. All my bolts, the threads should all be coated with Vaseline. Stop them corroding in place. And when we get it all together, we'll see how it cuts. It's a good idea in your toolbox to keep a can of oil to lubricate your tools after you've cleaned them to stop them from rusting. If you don't lubricate them, they'll just rust away quite quickly. Okay, so everything's oiled up and ready for reassembly now. Assembly is just the reverse of taking it apart. The last operation is to adjust the tightening of the center bolt. You want the blades to just glide across each other. You don't want it too loose and you don't want it too tight. So here we go. You don't want any play in the blades. That's a little tight, then it's not springing back by itself. So we'll loosen it off one notch to there. That feels good. We'll lock her up there. Just lock our tab down here. The pruners are all sharpened, looking brand new again, and ready to go for the spring season. Let's try out the pruners. We'll just snip off. Ah, they cut beautifully. Yeah, they work really nicely. I put some leather conditioner on the handles to help keep those in good shape. So that's it for today. Nigel Saunders of KW Bonsai. Thanks for watching. And do something green today. Take an old tool that you would probably have thrown out and challenge yourself to sharpen it and recondition it so you don't have to keep buying tools every time your tools get dull. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.